I feel like none of this is new. My world, the chaos around me, what I've known to be true. We think we know, but do we? Tick tock of the clock, and I see hands go in all directions. Can't see your face, but I see worry in my own reflections. Something tells me you've seen this face before. Redemption waits for you, I'm sure. I see your eyes in the moon.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Impossible Conversations. I'm your host, Brandy Deutsch, and this is not Sean Dolan. This is my good friend and colleague, Portia Booker, also known as Portia the producer. She's going to be my co host today, but also we're going to be talking to Portia about mental illness versus mental wellness. Welcome to the show, Portia. We're so happy to have you.
Look, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much, Brandy, for the introduction and inviting me on. I'm excited to dive into this conversation because, as you know, this is my area that I can talk forever about. So I'm
I know
excited.
it. I'm so excited. So let me tell everybody who you are. So Portia Booker is also known as Portia the producer, which I love that title, by the way, because it's like perfect. And Portia is the executive producer and host of Groove with Portia, a weekly radio show centered around personal and professional development. The show's reached over 70,000 listeners on WOVU, which is a station in Cleveland, Ohio, and it airs every Wednesday. She's the founder and startup of She's the founder of startup podcast and production company called What's in Your Pocket Media, and she's a longtime mental health advocate and suicide survivor. So we're so happy to have you, Portia. Welcome.
Ooh, I'm excited to be here because a few scenarios a few years ago, you wouldn't have met me if I would have taken my
Mm,
life. So I'm
mm.
honored to always show up and, you know, have these discussions to really keep the circle of inspiration and awareness going. So thank you so much, Brandy, for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And that's a really deep subject. I do want to talk about it, and we are going to go into it a little bit because I don't know anybody that hasn't been affected by suicide. I just don't. I don't know anyone that hasn't had an experience of someone they know or someone in their class or someone in their circles that has decided to end it. So I do want to talk about that a little bit towards the end. But first, I want to talk about you and your story and what what made you get into mental health, but more importantly, like, what made you really have want a platform to talk about it?
That's a good question, Brandy. So, what really led to my mental wellness journey? I like to tell people I was one of those lucky people that landed my dream job right out of college. And let's just say that dream turned into a nightmare very quickly. I noticed that I couldn't pay attention at the job, everything that I was reading, I could not function. And I ended up going to visit a psychiatrist, and they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder, the whole rigmarole, put me on meds. And just one day I woke up and I said, I can't do this anymore. I just cannot. I was at wit's end, but little did I know my breakdown led to my breakthrough. My breakdown happened on March 20th, 2017, when I wanted to jump off the bridge in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right on the Arkansas River. And I wanted to drown because I didn't want to have to explain to my family. I didn't want them to find me because then it would be all the questions of why, who coulda, shoulda, woulda. And so that was my avenue that I wanted to go out. But I'm thankful to this day, thankful to my work mom who picked up on the signs. When I was texting her earlier that day, she was like, Portia, you need to go to the hospital right now. She's like, you're not well, something's wrong. And I listened to her. I
Mm.
actually came down from where I was, got in my car, drove to the emergency room. She actually called there and made sure I went. So I got there, they, checked me in, and while I was sitting on the bed and that, I just took a minute to think about today has to stop. I have to stop what I'm doing because if I don't, I'm going to really end up in that river, really up a creek. And so that day, my breakdown led to my breakthrough to my true calling in life. It really opened up that onion of what's really the root of this. I like
Mm.
to tell people that the only thing that died on March 20th, 2017 was the expectation of Portia's life that everybody else wanted for me. And what was
Mm.
reborn was Portia taking the author pen back for her life.
Mm. Wow. That's really profound. That's a really profound realization. So, how old were you when that happened?
I was 26 when that happened.
26.
Yeah.
26. And had you struggled before, like when you were younger?
Yes, in high
Mm.
school I did. It's funny you bring that up, Brandy, because I had three different diagnoses. I like to make the joke, third time's a charm. So the first time when I actually went to see a professional about my mental health was in 2014, shortly after my breakup, and
Mm.
they diagnosed me with like a single episode of depression. Then in 2015, I went back after I was on one medication. Then they diagnosed me with anxiety. And then, of course, in 2017, I got diagnosed with bipolar. So it's like, okay, the third one stuck. I'll stick with that. Third time's a charm. And so, yes, I've dealt with depression for a while. I mean,
Mm.
and of course, I grew up in a household that was heavily driven by women. And of course, religion also plays a factor in that.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
remember, and I love my mom to death, I do. But when you grow up in a household where the Bible is the central answer for everything, it clouds any other opinions or any other alternatives. Because I remember one time I tried to tell my mom I was depressed, and I was pretty much met with, you better take your depressed A somewhere else. And
Mm.
from there, I felt that I could not share anything about my mental health. So, really, I stifled myself from that initial first time that I wanted to share about it with the person who I trusted, which was my mom. And don't get me wrong, of course, she grew up a little different where mental health was considered the white man's disease. And
Mm.
unfortunately, that's still the same trajectory that I find in a lot of
Mm.
people's thought pattern, that people in communities of color don't seek help for their mental health because it's predominantly white. But if you
Mm.
have a brain, you have mental health. Some people, what I would say, are subjected to more mental wellness obstacles than others. Like we all have our pick our poison moment, but some people are. And I'm one of those people. And I have to really remind myself that it's okay to not be okay today, but it's not okay to stay there.
Say that again, please.
It is okay to not be okay, but it is not okay to stay there too long.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's I think that's the crux of what we're talking about when we talk about mental health, right? I mean, mental health and mental wellness is really about how well we navigate what life is giving us, right? What life presents itself to us. So if we can look at something that happens and see it as just a happenstance, it's just something that happens and it's going to come and it's going to go, then then we can feel pretty okay mentally,
Hmm.
right? But if something happens and it feels like the end of the world, like like things can compound, right?
Hmm.
And again, we're just talking about basic mental health. There are mental health disorders that there's absolutely no other way we can like logic or think about it or feel about, like it's just going to happen,
Hmm.
right? I mean, when I think about some of the people that I know that's been diagnosed with some disorders, like schizophrenia. We're talking about the serious ones now, right? Like schizophrenia, like severe depression. I've lived with chronic depression my whole life. Didn't even really realize. I used to talk about, the first bout when I was 9, but and to me that was one of the most severe. But really and truly throughout my life, like I've gone through these chronic depressive episodes, like these bouts. And there's not anything any one person can say or do that can help you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
It is truly a mental condition. And how amazing that you had this epiphany when you were thinking about committing suicide, and then, oh, wait a minute, things can be different.
Mm-hmm.
It is completely up to that individual. And I'm just, what I wanted to talk about is the way, because you touched on it. You said, people of color, they don't typically go out and get help for their depression. And I think it is a worldwide problem,
Mm-hmm.
certainly a local problem that I can see, where if something's wrong, they don't seek help. Why
Mm-mm.
why why is that, Portia? Why do you think people don't seek help?
I can say from the way I grew up, if you grew up, like I said, in a religious household, the Bible is normally your first answer.
Mm,
Second, if you grow up in a household that is single parent, or what I call the Ford method, fix or repair daily, you
mm,
find something in the house because you often can't afford to go to the hospital, get accurate, consistent medical care.
mhm,
The other thing is the stigma that's placed on mental health in communities of color. And
mhm,
I just had this conversation on a podcast, 2 weeks ago, where I was interviewing a man who was a man of color that sought help for his mental health. And he talked about how men have that toxic stigma, as in you have to be the tin man. And it's almost the same
mm,
when you're a woman of color. See, I grew up in a household strongly run by women. So that
mm,
wear your cape, don't let your crown fall is toxic. I
mm,
don't care what anybody says. That
mhm.
is toxic to continue to, I would say, inject that into the next generation of kids and families, because
Yes.
we can't, we're not supposed to be on the go, 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 go. We can't power through every single thing, every single moment of adversity, trauma, because like what you mentioned, Brandy, it compounds. And of
Yep.
course, it can only compound so much. That's like taking a Pepsi bottle and continuing to shake it up and shake it up, and then maybe drop a few mementos and then it's going to explode.
That's right. That's right.
So, one, it's the stigma that continues to circulate that seeking help is weakness. That's the big one.
Mhm,
Because I know I
mm,
struggled with that for a while. Two,
mm,
it's if you grow up in a religious based household where you're told that seek help from the Bible. And that's for a whole nother discussion for another day, about the church being a place of healing, but the church has a hard time addressing mental health as
mm,
a space of healing. So that's for
mm,
a whole nother day. The
mm.
third thing, there's a lot of, I'm going to say it, gaslighting in the healthcare system for people of color. Their
Yes.
symptoms are often dismissed, saying, oh, you should change your diet. I could be the healthiest person on earth. And, it's like an allergic reaction, is how your mental health can be on certain days. Some days
Mhm.
you'll be fine. And then it's just that one thing that you eat that sends you into either a manic episode or a full blown depressed episode.
It's true.
Me personally, I don't eat carbs because I notice when I eat bread or cereal, oatmeal, anything that's not out of the basic fruit, veggie, protein diet that I've been on for the last year, I instantly can tell, oh, my
Yep.
mental health is going down. Oh,
Yep.
I'm feeling depressed. Or like they say about the red dyes in food, and that can create mania. But
Yes, excitotoxins. That's right. Absolutely. Definitely. I mean, you raised some really important points here. Like the stigma around it, definitely a big deal. I remember, it was funny. Like I remember being told when I was younger, when I tried to talk about it, it was like, well, you're either going to talk about it or you're going to do it. but don't talk about it and not do it, because that's not cool and that hurts people's feelings. Like,
Mm,
hurts your feelings? What are you like, oh, it's selfish to do that because you're not thinking of other people. Like, are you kidding me? Yeah, crazy stuff like that. You hear the strangest things whenever, because what I really think about that is, you're right. People don't know
mm-mm,
how to talk with people that have mental challenges, that are
mhm,
dealing with things mentally, because they really don't want to acknowledge that or recognize that. One of my best friends from junior high committed suicide when he
mm,
was in his 20s. And he had um there's a name for it now, but it was like a kind of a nervous tick, and it caused his head to kind of move back and forth
mhm,
all the time without it's not something he could control, and he was bullied a lot because of that. People made fun of
mm,
him because of that, even in his 20s. I was just like, how, like, what is wrong with people, even at
mm.
that late in the game? Like, why would you be doing that? And his mother and some of the people in his circles seemed to feel like that was part of it for him. But I also feel like drugs and alcohol add to the problem of mental health issues. I mean, and it's for and that happens with so many different people. I mean, there are drug and alcohol related illnesses that compound mental illnesses and make it even more difficult for people to overcome what they already have. And ironically, they sometimes people will run to those things to feel better, not realizing that it's making things a lot worse.
See, I want to comment on that. See, the way I view mental health, to me, mental illness is kind of the root. And people who unfortunately are subjected to addiction, to me, the root is mental health, but to me, it's more socially acceptable to say you're an alcoholic or have some other type of addiction versus if you have a severe mental health condition, when to me, they go hand in hand.
Yeah,
Because when you look at the word addict, the first word you see in that word is add. So when is enough enough?
yeah.
And I know we can go on a whole topic around addiction, but I
We
do
talk about
think,
it quite often on this
yeah,
show.
I think addiction and mental health go hand in hand, and we need to stop separating the two. It's just, it
Absolutely.
depends on the animal that you're addressing. When it comes to
Mm,
addiction, whether it's alcohol, prescription drugs, that's going to be a different tailored path towards recovery versus
mm,
when you have bipolar, depression, anxiety, etc. No one shoe fits all, but I do believe the start of addressing mental health is open discussion and creating a safe space where people feel heard,
yes.
because that's what gets me often about our mental health system is people are often clumped in one category. If you have bipolar, you're going to experience mania, you're going to have lows of depression, you're going to have a a very high sex drive, you're going to have all this other stuff. But that doesn't fit for everybody who has bipolar.
That's right.
Some people who have bipolar unfortunately take a cocktail of medication. I
Mm,
luckily, thank knock on wood, I've been medication free for 3 years. And
congratulations.
thank you. Thank you. And I know that not everybody can be the same way like me, but I still continue to show up and encourage other people to really take charge of your mental wellness journey. Because if your mental health is fractured, your life is fractured. And I'm going to say that
Right.
again. If your mental health is fractured, your whole life is going to be fractured. Because I've lost friends, I've lost good
Mm,
jobs, I've lost a lot of stuff when I did not take charge of my mental well.
right. Absolutely. Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. I totally agree with that, like, 100%. It all these things go hand in
Yeah.
hand. And you started to talk about where it starts, where the journey
Keep going.
starts. I want to talk about where mental health for a lot of people even began. right? I want to talk about trauma a little bit and how trauma plays a part
Ooh.
in mental wellness and mental health, because not just mental emotional trauma, but physical trauma like head
Mhm.
injuries. I have a very good friend who's a mitigation expert, and she's been an advocate for people who have had mental injuries. And I need to have her on the show now that I'm thinking about her. She needs to come on and talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, she talks extensively to people about sentencing people who have done crimes, violent crimes, nonviolent crimes, but sentencing and how harsh it is on people who have had trauma,
Mhm.
mental, physical, emotional trauma, and it really affects them in a very negative way. And it's that old adage, hurt people hurt people. Like, yes, it's
Yeah.
true and it happens. Not intentionally sometimes, but that
Mhm.
is the way that the course of the mind takes when something traumatic happens. What do you want to speak to about trauma?
Ooh, that's a deep one, and I'll say it this way. What I often find, and don't get me wrong, I've been through some traumatic situations, and I'm not debunking anybody's trauma, because trauma is trauma and trauma is unique to each person. What one person may find, for example, if I come over to your house, Brandy, and we're both sitting at your kitchen table having a cup of coffee, and I hear the door, somebody knocking at your door, I could think it's an active shooter, while you're just expecting a delivery from Amazon.
Mm,
So that's why trauma is so unique. One. Two, when it comes to trauma as well, what I noticed is trauma is like an umbrella that we tend to house a lot of things under, whether it's something that we experienced in our childhood, whether it's, being bullied, whether it's something at work. We house so much under that traumatic umbrella instead of, to me, trying to address it as going from trauma to treatment,
mhm.
because like the saying goes, what you focus on becomes your reality. If you keep calling something trauma, that's what it's going to always be.
Yep.
So to me, acknowledge, yes, it was traumatic. Two, now what are we going to do about going from this I'm the victim of this
Yes.
to being victorious? And I'll be a little personal here. I was sexually assaulted at 19.
Mm.
And it took me a few years to be able to, one, forgive myself, two, forgive the person, and then three, be able to separate
We lost her. She'll be back. Hang in there.
I'm here. I'm
There
here.
she is.
It took me years to separate the trauma from myself to become what I would deem as treated. Like
Yes.
I'm still going to have
Yes.
my moments of, breakdowns or whatever when it arises, and I allow myself to grieve, but it doesn't, to me, hold that same heavy burden or
Correct.
weight anymore. So
Right.
that's what I want to say about trauma. Is trauma is this umbrella that we tend to keep open and house so much under, instead of figuring out a way to go from trauma to treatment, victim to victorious.
Yes, 100% agree with that philosophy. I think that this is taking like a quantum leap, right? Because I think what happens with mental health, and I'm kind of going from one mindset to another mindset. It's like, the first thing is we need to acknowledge that support and help is
Yes.
available. Like, it's there. And I'm not talking about just for people with mental health challenges. I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about the people who love people and care about people that have mental health challenges, because there's this kind of education that needs to be addressed, lack of education,
Mm-hmm.
really, that needs to be addressed on how to handle some of these things that happen around mental health. There's that. And then what we're discussing now around trauma, 100% I agree with you. You know I agree with you. I work with people who
Mm-hmm.
have had traumatic experiences and beliefs around that, what I call barrier beliefs around their trauma, and we resolve them. Like we resolve the traumatic the traumatic thing that happened. We make it more neutralized so that people aren't triggered
Yes.
into having an experience again and again and again. And I mean, there's severe trauma, and there's, like you said, like there's like light trauma, but it's still a kind of impression that it leaves on us. And it definitely can be resolved. It can definitely be something that doesn't hold people back anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it can also be something that creates a belief that we have, and then it can be changed. So anybody who think, and the other thing about, well, my mom had mental health problems, my dad had mental health issue, right? There's the
Don't even go there with that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that one.
It's real. Okay. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Let's acknowledge it. It's real. And there's a thing called epigenetics, which means we can change our environment. Like you're saying, change what you eat, change the input, change the people that are living around you. Because listen, if you're still in the environment where people have mental health challenges
Mm-hmm.
and you're wanting to get out of that situation and make it different for yourself, you have to remove yourself from that situation. There's
Yes.
no two ways about that. I mean, I really feel like that's what recovery centers are about too, or about changing your environment.
Mm-hmm.
That is number one. So, absolutely, I agree with you 100%. There's this education element that a lot of people need to start learning about these
Mm-hmm.
things. And then there's also the other part of that, which is like, oh, it's time to heal from it, you know?
Yeah. I want to go back to what you said, Brandy, about triggers.
Yes.
That is a key area that I want more people to learn their triggers. And it
Mm,
may take a little while. Like what I mentioned about how certain foods will make my mood either go up or down, mostly
yes.
bread, those things. There's certain phrases that people will say, and they do it unintentionally. Like you said, unintentionally sometimes hurt people continue to hurt other people. But there's certain phrases that people will say to me that instantly puts me in that caged bird scenario. For
Mm,
example, I don't like it when people ask me what's wrong, because
mm,
what happens is it's like you take a lighter and you light a piece of paper on fire. It continues
mhm.
to burn and fester and catch everything else around it. So
Yes.
when somebody asks me what's wrong, if there's somebody who's close to me, as in my circle, my support system, I tell them, do not ask me what's wrong. Ask me what's on your mind. Because
Mm,
what happens is my brain is trying to find what's wrong with me, whether it's something on my skin,
mm.
whether it's, something in my hair, there's a internal flaw that I'm still working through, quote unquote, because we're all work in
Right.
progress. So
Yes.
it forces me to find, quote unquote, what's wrong. And then I'm back in that downward depressed slump. So now when
Mm,
people ask me that unintentionally, I channel my intuition and use my self awareness muscle to say, they're asking what's on your mind. Because then it
mm,
helps me to say, okay, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I'm feeling. Can you help me?
mm. That's
So I
such an
think
interesting point. Yes.
it's important to know your triggers, because you're going to get triggered all the time, unfortunately, because
Mhm.
life happens, lives, and you're going to meet some people who they mean well. You're going to be in situations. For example, I love to use the bullying scenario, where if you grew up being bullied by somebody in a blue hoodie and you go to your first job and your boss is wearing a blue hoodie that looks like the one from the person who was bullying you, it's going to cause anxiety. It's going to
Mm,
force you into that traumatic scenario, again, because we both know trauma has no time or no understanding of time. The way trauma
mhm.
works, it can happen a minute ago and it can
That's right.
bring you back to it.
That's
So
right.
it's very important to know, in my opinion, as somebody who is a mental wellness advocate and somebody who on a daily basis works on their mental health, learn your triggers, because if
Yes.
you know them, you won't you'll be more proactive instead of reactive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And once you know your triggers, then there are ways to neutralize them.
Yes.
Just like what we were talking about before. Knowing is half the battle, though. I agree 100%. Knowing is half the
Yeah.
battle. Once you know, you can be aware. Oh, it's not actually them. Actually, it's me.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I love what you said. It's not that there's anything wrong with you. You know, we're not broken.
No.
Like none of us are broken. I love that analogy where, a disco ball is a bunch of pieces of glass
Mm-hmm.
all put together and it reflects light in such a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful way. I love that analogy because it's not that we're broken, it's that we are in different pieces. And when we come together, whenever and things, and I'm a big advocate of like yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, body, mind, spirit practices. I know you talk to a lot of people on your show
Mm-hmm.
about these different types of ways of, you know, not dealing with life, but being who
Yes.
you really want to be, and showing up authentically and showing up with integrity for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in doing so, you end up doing that for other people too. But the main thing is to come back to self and what it
Yes.
means to be more of who you really are. And if that means parts of you are, still kind of scattered, bring them back together. There are ways to do that.
Mm-hmm. My remedy for that, Brandy, every single day, I start my day with gratitude. I
Mm,
also reflect every single day, and I also do a grounding meditation, sometimes twice a day.
mm,
Because what I find that really helps me when I'm struggling mentally is to bring myself back to the present.
mm,
And that is not always easy to do. But my
right.
grounding exercise, I put my right hand over my heart,
Mhm,
my left hand over my belly button, and
mm,
I close my eyes and I let my ears pick up every sound in the room. So that way, okay, I know
mm.
I'm in the dining room or I know I'm in the kitchen. I'm aware of the time, place, everything. And
Yes.
then I just start to slowly bring my attention back to my breathing. And then I
Mm,
notice that my lungs will expand. I'm noticing more oxygen is flowing to my brain where I feel
mhm,
more relaxed, my shoulders drop and everything. And I only do it for like 5 minutes. And sometimes I have to do it for 10, just depends on the type of day and that. But
mhm.
it helps to bring me back to the present. And it also helps me to find that balance because that's the key to me, when you're someone who is hypersensitive to mental wellness obstacles, which I'm one of them,
Yes. Yes.
you have to find that balance throughout the day. And not all the time your remedies work, and that's okay. That's when you can be creative. That's
You
where I think, they make the jokes, right, Brandy, about people who are mentally unstable, they're normally geniuses. Use that inner genius to be creative. I'm just telling you.
right. It's true. It's absolutely true. That's a great exercise. And that, yes, getting grounded and being present, that's good advice for anyone, whether you
Hmm.
have mental challenges or not. That is really good advice because everybody has stress.
Yes.
I mean, if not, you may be living on a mountain somewhere and you meditate all day long, and even then there's stress, right? But we all have
Yeah.
stress, and we can all learn from just being present and having that mindfulness. So
Yes.
good. So good.
Ooh.
Even if you're doing something, you can still be present with what you're doing, just paying attention. And that's another thing, paying attention to how we're feeling in the moment, right? And because, how you're feeling, what you're thinking creates action or non-action.
Hmm.
And one thing leads to another. So if we're being aware, if we're being present with how we feel and what we're doing in the moment, then our actions are going to follow something, maybe a different trajectory, if we
Hmm.
decide to be present and be calm and connect with ourselves instead of looking outward and going, this thing, that person, you know, letting the emotions get the best of us. Because it's the emotion that is charged, you know.
Whew. You ain't
The
kidding.
emotions are the things that are really charged. I want to just mention the fact that two of the most prevalent, what I'm seeing online around what the most prevalent mental challenges are for people are anxiety and depression. So that's
Mm-hmm.
interesting, and as a coach and kind of what I counsel people on the most is staying present, because depression really looks towards the past,
Yep.
and anxiety looks towards the future. That those disorders are really about looking outward into these different two places, whereas when we're present, those things are not affecting us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the memory or the worry, and it has the emotion of the connection of what the emotions are in the present moment. We have control over the emotion. We can have control over the
Mm-hmm.
emotion. We have the option to. We can't change anything about the past or the future, because that's not where we are. We're only in the present. So you hit the nail on the head with that one, Portia. That was such a valuable tool to have in our toolbox, is that meditation and that presence.
Yeah, and I just learned the value of that lesson this year about the power of being present, because when I started doing that grounding meditation, I wasn't wanting to meditate. I'm like, huh? You mean I have to sit like the yogis on TV, where they sitting there on a mat in a sweatshop or wherever they're sitting? I'm like, I have to do that. But then when I learned about the simple grounding meditation that I do, I'm like, sometimes, Brandy, if I'm out and I haven't done my meditation, like if I'm in my car going to an event or something, and I feel that stress and strain in my chest, I
Yes.
will park my car wherever I'm at, turn the car off, lock the door, set my timer on my phone, and do my meditation where I'm at,
Awesome.
because I need that. I do it daily.
Yes,
I don't miss a
absolutely.
beat. Mm-mm.
Well, let's talk a little bit about empathics and
Oof.
how mental health affects those who are empathic. And what I mean by empathic is there's these subset of people who can feel other people's emotions. They feel the tension in the room. They feel something is about to happen. Like they
Mm-hmm.
can they can sense the um, the air. They can sense the energy. They can sense the emotion, and sometimes they take it on.
Yep.
They bring it in and take it on for various reasons. Whatever reason that is.
Mm-hmm.
Different people, it's for different reasons. But I think mental health issues can also be compounded, as we talked
Mm-hmm.
before, by having empathic abilities. What do
Yes.
you want to speak to on that?
Oh, I can definitely agree with that, because I'm one of them. I'm empathic to a T. And unfortunately, sometimes I unintentionally take on other people's emotions and
Mm,
their energy. And
mm,
I find it hard when it's been a heavy day, I haven't taken care of myself, to what I call exfoliate those emotions and get them out of me. So I have to question myself, are these my emotions or are these somebody else's? And
yes.
sometimes I have a hard time discerning or deciding which of the two. And other times I do take them on unintentional. I do take them on purpose, not unintentionally, because I have a big heart and I don't like to see people suffer, because I know what it was like to have no one, to struggle alone when I was really dealing with my mental health by myself, and in a brand new state, brand new city, my close inner circle wasn't around me. So I don't like to see other people go through what I went through. And so what I really do now, Brandy, when I find myself in that boat of I've taken on too many people's emotions and I start to
Mm,
feel it physically in my system, like in my wrist, in my shoulders, in my stomach, I take a minute to write, because
mm,
writing, to me, if you're somebody who is, like I said, sensitive to mental wellness obstacles, journal every single day, because
mm,
that helps you to one, I call it the constipation effect, because our bodies, we take on a lot. And if
Yes.
you're somebody who's sensitive, it's like being constipated with these other people's emotions, with
Mm,
whatever. So you have to get it out of your system somehow. And to me, writing does that, because you're able to fully express yourself without somebody's judgment. Because I think sometimes you don't want to always talk. You don't want to hear somebody else's opinion. Even just having somebody present in the room is annoying. So just you and your own thoughts, write it out to the T. Literally what I call bleed on paper. Just let it all
mm,
out, get it out of your system to free yourself, because that's what
mm.
I have to do. And to me, writing is the most intimate form of self care that anybody can practice. You could just write one word, hi, and that could be your word for the day. Or you can
Right.
be like me and write 8 pages one day, then I'm 20 one day, then another day I'm 2.
That's amazing. That's a great idea. I have a good friend that I do retreats with. His name's Mike Thacker, and he advocates for journaling for sure. And he and I had this discussion about adding in journaling to one of our retreats that we're doing. And I said, I'm just not a journaler. I don't really write unless I have a purpose to write, just writing down my feelings. I did
Mm-hmm.
when I was younger for sure, and it did help me. I do journal for my children. So I have journals for them that I kind of write in there and say what they were doing and how they were doing it and how I reacted to it. But for myself, what I like instead of journaling is drawing. I like to doodle. I like to draw. I like to move energy with my pen or pencil. And I used to draw mandalas actually. So when I was 15, I had a really bad bout of depression. I started intuitively drawing mandalas. And I was like, wow, I started to feel better, not even knowing back then what it was. As I got older and I learned about mandalas and how they're sacred circles and they help us connect with our spirit. Now there's a whole thing around mandala coloring books, which is, I'm like, man, I really missed out on a financial opportunity. I could have invested in mandala coloring books. But it's very helpful. I think it's very helpful to be able to connect with that oneness.
Mm-hmm.
The circle is about oneness. The circle is about unity and just connecting with spirit and connecting with other people in that way. But not overtly. It's
Mm-hmm.
a covert kind of way of connecting.
It's not
So
too late,
I'm
Brandy. It ain't too
I know,
late.
right? I can make my own. I need to do my own now. That's great. So writing and journaling or even drawing. I know a lot of younger kids who like to draw. My son is an amazing artist. And so I'm sure, he picked that up. I feel so blessed that we've got all these amazing ways now of dealing with and working through mental illness and mental challenge to turn it into mental wellness.
Yes.
And I'm so grateful for you, Portia, for coming on the show today. How can people hear your show? How can people catch your show, Groove with Portia?
So you can type in Grew with Portia you can do a Google search of Grew with Portia. I'm around somewhere like a donut. I'm on Spotify, Apple, Google. I just recently got on Amazon and
Nice.
iHeartMedia. So yeah, you can find me on almost every streaming platform. You can connect with me on Facebook, Portia Booker, Instagram, Portia_hugs, because I'm a big hugger. I'm a firm believer that giving somebody
Aw,
a hug helps them to release stress and also helps them heal. So those are my
absolutely.
3 main ways you can find me. I'm somewhere. You can just Google my name, Portia Booker, and you'll know it's me.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Portia, it's been a joy to talk with you today. Thank you so much for coming on and for being my co host and our guest. We look forward to hearing from you again really soon. And I mean, yeah, you guys check out Portia. She's amazing. Her podcast, like, oh my gosh, so many amazing people she speaks with, so many amazing things that they have that help people and support mental health. So check her out. Thanks so much, Portia.
Anytime, Brandy. I'm here. Anytime you need me to come on, I can talk about this for hours.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, guys. Hey, have a wonderful day. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.